Okay. I'm gonna do something different. I don't like the lighting back there. Just go back here. Sorry about that. Maybe that may switch this around. Okay. That's still pretty bad. I don't know if anyone's watching Facebook. Hey, so I have a tendency to not very good. Um, what's the word I'm looking? I'll start reading books and then I won't finish them. So I figure like I'm gonna read this book by the history of the popes. There's like at least 35 volumes of this. I can't remember by Ludwig Pasteur. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right. Pasteur, Ludwig Pasteur. And so I was gonna read it, and I'm probably gonna break this up in like 10-minute segments, just because I don't know if I can handle that too much, or anyone else could handle that just watching me read. So anyway, I'm going to do that, and I just have a tendency to. I have several ideas. I want to do the Psalms like this, and like some other things. And so I just figured if I just record myself reading, number one, it'll motivate me to read the next section, and the next section. So anyway, that's the kind of the idea that I'm thinking about. So I'm gonna read this like for like probably about 10 minutes, and then we'll see what happens. So I'll see. I'm just trying to motivate myself to read. I guess what I'm trying to say. And there's a whole bunch of stuff I want to read, but I never get around to doing it because I'm like, there's so much stuff I want to read. Anyway, so this is my first little check on that. Um, so here we go. So this is the let's see. This is History of the Popes, Volume 1 by Dr. Ludwig Pasteur, History of the Popes from the Close of the Middle Ages. Drawn from the secret archives of the Vatican and other original sources. He's a professor of history in the University of Innsbruck. Edited by Frederick Ignatius Antrobus of the Oratory. Second edition. Volume 1 from London. Let's see. Anything else I want to read on that page? I don't think so. Contents of the volume 1 is a brief of His Holiness Pope Leo XIII to Professor Pastor, which is in Latin, so I can't read that to you. And then notice by His Eminence Cardinal Manning, and then editor's preface and author's preface, and the list of complete titles of books frequently quoted in the volumes 1 and 2, table of contents, list of documents in the appendix, introduction, the popes of Avignon from 1305 to 1326, the schism and the great heretical movements of 1378 to 1406, and the synods of Pisa and Constance, 1409 to 1417, Pope Martin V from 1417 to 1431, Eugenius IV, 1431 to 1447. So it looks like we're covering 2 centuries. So that's cool. All right, and I guess I'm assuming this is both volume 1 and volume 2, but we'll see. I haven't really read this yet. Okay. Then you have the brief of His Holiness Pope Leo XIII, Professor Pastor, and I'm not going to read the Latin because I can't read the Latin. This is the notice. Professor Pastor's History of the Popes from the close of the Middle Ages comes to us with a singular and exceptional weight of authority. First, because the ample encouragement conveyed by the brief of Leo XIII, when the first volume of the history was completed. Such letters of His Holiness do not, indeed, convey a critical approval of the work, but an abundant testimony to the fitness and learning of Dr. Pasteur for the accomplishment of his undertaking. Secondly, because this history may be regarded as the first fruits of the action of the Holy Father, which a little time ago so surprised the writers of anti-Catholic history. Leo XIII, as it will be remembered, addressed a letter to the 5 cardinals whom he had appointed as a commission to oversee the publication of historical matters contained in the Vatican archives. The Holy Father charged them to see that the history of the Holy See and the Church should be should be written with absolute truth on the only just and imperishable principle that the historical veritas, history's historical truth, ought to be supreme, of which we have a divine example in Holy Writ, where the sins even of saints are openly recorded as the wickedness of sinners. Thirdly, because no author has written the history of the popes with such copious evidence drawn not only from the Vatican archives, since they were thrown open by Pope Leo XIII, but as a multitude of other sources hereto never examined, as, for instance, the conspiratorial archives, the archives of the Lateran, of the Inquisition, of the Propaganda, of the Sistine Chapel, of the Secretariat of Briefs, and the Library of St. Peter's. As to the Vatican Library, even Rank and Gregorius were only able to inspect a small number of manuscripts. Beyond these, Professor Pasteur has examined the libraries and private archives of Rome, the public and semi-public libraries as the Anglica, the Barbariana, the Castentense, the Chiga, the Corsina, the Valicina. You're noticing my Latin, Italian's terrible. The Alteria, the Bolgese, and the Buono Compagna, the Anima, the Campo Santo, and Santo Spirito, and the Colonia, the Gaetina, that's probably wrong, Ricia. To all these may be added the archives of Milan, Paris, Florence, Vienna, Mantua, Lucca, Modena, and Naples, and Provence and Treves. If anyone will examine the notes in reference at the foot of the pages in this work, he will see at once that this list of authorities is not a mere catalog of names, but of sources from which a copious and truthful history has been industrially drawn. If any further evidence were needed to show how eminently this history has been written, it will be sufficient to add that these 2 volumes contain, besides the introduction, only the history of 4 pontiffs, from 1417 to 1458. Nevertheless, in that brief period, it is to be found one of the most decisive events of history, the effects of which is in full action upon the Church, upon the world at this day. All histories of this period, from Ranke to Quintin, will need extensive correction and in large measure to be written. In the time of Nicholas V, the so-called Renaissance was at its height and parted itself into 2 distinct schools, the heathen humanist and the Christian humanist. The heathen humanists plunged themselves with all their intellectual culture into the atheism and foulness of a revived paganism. They were the forerunners of the intellectual apostasy from the Church, which from 70 years after broke out in Germany under the pretense of Reformation. This revolt in the religion of individual judgment against divine authority was translated in the last century into the domain of politics by the First French Revolution, which has been truly described by Carlyle as the last act in the drama of Lutheranism. The Christian humanists elaborated all intellectual culture in perfect fidelity to the revelation of the Christian faith. Nicholas V became their patron and protector, and thereby placed himself at the head of the intellectual culture which has pervaded the Catholic Church and expanded itself from time of his pontificate to the pontificate of Leo XIII. Henry Edward, Cardinal Archbishop, October 27th, 1891. And I think I'll stop there just to break it up so that at least I have a stopping point where that first thing was.